Hello and welcome to Burnout, the weekly drag racing show. I am your host, Wes Buck, and we are so excited to have you. Before we dive into this week's episode, let's check in with my co-hosts, Alex Taylor and Mike Galimi. How you guys doing?
Doing good here. I'm living my first life post-graduation, so I'm trying to figure out how to figure it all out the shop. So
it's all downhill from here, right? Mike, you doing all right?
I'm doing good. I got my hair cut in the underground economy that has become, a way of life in New York. So I'm feeling pretty good, feeling fresh and ready to rock with today.
Isn't that exciting though? Like, you have to admit, a bootleg haircut, that's kind of fun. If anything good has come out of COVID, it's been Alex graduating college and you getting a haircut, underground haircut. It's awesome. Yeah. All right, guys.
You have liquor, but no haircut.
No liquor, no haircut. Hey, guys, hold those belts tight. Let's dive into this week's episode. Let's dive into this week's three big things. I think it is well established at this point that this is my favorite part of the show, and it's even more exciting when we get to do it and actually talk about racing that's happening either last weekend or next weekend. So a whole new take on the three big things this week. First off, we're going to talk a little bit about how the many different iterations that drag racing is going to take in the coming weeks, with some tracks being wide open, others being extremely limited, and everything in between. Alex is going to bring up a little bit of her thoughts on the logistics and just how our interactions at the racetracks we visit are going to change. Are we going to shake hands and hug and high five, or are we going to bump elbows from here on out? And I will bookend the conversation with my thoughts on where we're at in the radial racing product life cycle, if you will. So anyways, Mike, let's get started and talk about what drag racing is going to look like, from a national event to these private test sessions or events like we saw in Darlington last weekend, WOOOSTOCK. There's a lot of different forms these deals are going to take on.
I think change and ability to adapt is going to be the theme for the next several months. Is everyone just trying to navigate their political problems locally. Every state's different, every county's different. Within New York, 2 hours north of here, Lebanon Valley Dragway is opening up, but down here nothing's open. And so it's going to be interesting, track to track, what those changes are. We saw, WOOOSTOCK had to quickly change from having fans to no fans. And, NASCAR, watching that NASCAR race, no fans, and they're 5 miles up the road. But they had a lot more restrictions, it sounded like, than WOOOSTOCK. So it's going to be interesting how all these states navigate it and, what's going to transpire from there.
I'll interject that it was weird there, and it's interesting because each one of these new developments, or whatever the arrangement will be, each one of them have their own nuances and they create issues where, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but one of the ongoing problems that the track management at Darlington were having this past weekend at WOOOSTOCK were all of a sudden a race team's got 27 crew guys, right? Because the tracks were not limited whatsoever on how many crew members a race team could have, but they weren't allowed to have fans. So we were seeing trucks and trailers pull in from long distances that had 15 crew guys that were behind them in 2 or 3 rental cars, right? And it's just, there's a whole world of new issues to contend with. Not to mention, drag racing isn't necessarily like super huggy and touchy-feely, but man, there's a lot of social interaction at the racetrack, and I witnessed what I believe to be the best effort that I've seen to thwart that I don't even know how to say it, to restrict it, but you just can't do it. It is a virtual impossibility. Every time the sheriff's department and everybody that was involved in like calming things down and spreading people out would make a little bit of progress, a group would just congregate elsewhere. Humans, we're social creatures. We can't, it's so hard to adhere to these guidelines. And I'm praying for anybody that is tasked with trying to legitimately enforce social distancing policies at a racetrack in the coming weeks, because I think they've got their hands full.
Right. Like, as a rule is made, a rule is going to be broken kind of thing. Like, and you can't blame anyone. It's not even intentionally breaking that rule, but as you're saying, like, a new one's made and then It's just human nature. And that's something I know we've discussed about previously on the show, is like, how do you take that out of racing? Like, how do you just can't.
You see it everywhere, right? Like look at the beach problem that these communities are facing, where people just naturally congregate together, and it's just a natural caveat with what's going on.
One of the things that I noticed this past weekend at WOOOSTOCK, and I spoke with Keith Berry after the fact, one of my go-tos is to call people and say, okay, highs and lows. I do it with my kids at the dinner table every night. What's the high of your day? What's the low of your day? And I asked Keith those same questions, and he said, it's interesting, Wes, that all the highs produced all the lows. Like the highs of having a crazy turnout of cars, 300 race cars, 300 heads-up race cars. He goes, that was awesome, and I was over the moon about it. But we were also in no way, shape, or form prepared to handle that kind of car count. We weren't staffed for it. We weren't ready for it, and we didn't have the infrastructure beforehand in place to contend with that. And I think that as what I saw in Darlington above all else was a tremendous level of pent-up demand. People want to race. I mean, there were guys there. I mean, going back to Tulsa a couple of weeks ago at the throwdown at T-Town, I saw a top alcohol funny car entered in Super Pro, like in their bracket class, because the dude just wanted to race, right? So he entered his top alcohol funny car in the local no box class, right? And it was hilarious. And you saw a lot of the same thing in Darlington, where guys were just buying tech cards for whatever class they could kind of slide into just because they want to race. So I think every step forward we are going to have as a sport, there are going to be newfound obstacles, newfound hurdles. It's a very interesting time. You're exactly right, Mike. And it will continue. Alex, that leads us, perfect segue, into a slew of other new normals. I spoke about it in the intro to the segment, how different things are going to be for racers from a logistics standpoint. I know you have some thoughts and feelings on how these hotel situations are going to work, restaurants, eating at the track, interacting with others. Where do you stand on it?
Right. So like, I know that at first it's like, how is that important? But let me give my back thoughts on this. So I'm getting ready for Rocky Mountain Race Week at the end of June. And so with that, not only are we racing at 5 different tracks for 5 different days, so bring in the logistics of all of that, we've also got, a 1,200 mile road trip. So, and it's in Colorado, which is a heavily restricted state. So you've got the food and the gas and the travel and all of the logistics around actually getting to the racetrack. I know that's a little bit of a different situation, but I feel like for any racer, you still have that big trip that comes for a lot of the races. So as we've talked before, will that make it where people race more locally? What's it going to look like in the coming months? Will the logistics of getting to the race hold racers back? I know restrictions are being lifted, but then in some places you see where they're put right back down. So I don't know. I think that's something that needs to be discussed, because it definitely affects the actual racing itself.
Yeah. So like Carl Tasca, we were talking to him about an NMCA event with his Cobra Jet. And, before we had moved one of our events, the state of Rhode Island where he lives, if you left the state and came back, you had to go under 2-week quarantine. So, and I don't know if that's still in place. Right. But, that could be a problem if that's some states still carry that kind of restriction.
And I hate to keep hitting on quarantine, but
no, I mean, you can't. How can you not hit on it? You're right, Alex. I mean, it's like we're tired. I think everybody's tired and exhausted by this whole situation, but it's impacted everybody in a multitude of different ways. And that's exactly right. I mean, you travel to a race and you return home, and all of a sudden you're expected to go under a 14-day quarantine. All the silly things that, like, I'll tell you what, a big problem for Wes Buck this past weekend in Darlington, South Carolina, is that the hotel people don't service your room overnight. This is a problem. I've spent my entire life sleeping on fresh bed sheets at hotels, and it's a huge issue with me. And I'm thinking to myself, am I going to have to start traveling with bed sheets? This is some bull, what? I couldn't believe it. I walked into my room and I go, what? They didn't even service my room. What? It's like 9 o'clock. What's going on? I run down to the front desk and like, we're not going to service your room till like a week after you leave. And I'm okay. No joke. And that's every hotel, I think, chain has a multitude of different policies, but it's just, I think the point is that we don't even know the lengths and the range of impacts that all of this is going to have on our daily lives. I can't imagine the mental checklist. It's already a lot to get ready to go racing, right? I mean, Mike's done it a million times. Alex, you've done it a million times. I mean, making sure, everything. Do the trailer lights work? Do we have a valid license plate on the trailer? Is the car strapped down? I mean, just all the things you have to do to get ready to go racing. And now you have to think about whether or not you're going to have to go under a 14-day quarantine upon your return home.
Right.
Or make your own bed in the morning.
And that's completely unacceptable.
Big problems.
Really big problems. I mean, I admit it's a first world problem, but it definitely caught me. But you just don't know. You never know where COVID-19 is going to turn up, how it's going to impact you, on a day-to-day basis. So, All right, moving on as we continue through our three big things. One of the things that I saw that really just hit me like a ton of bricks was this past weekend in Darlington. This is an event that has, for the last few years, actually admittedly has had many different iterations. WOOOSTOCK initially was a no-time grudge racing event. That was kind of the bread and butter of the program. Late in the promotional cycle, they introduced a big payout Radial versus the World event or shootout that was won by Stevie Fast Jackson. The world record in the class was set. The quickest side-by-side run in the class was set. And it kind of set the tone that Radial versus the World would be the marquee attraction at WOOOSTOCK for the foreseeable future. Here in 2020, having been at the event, it is my opinion that the Radial versus the World show, from car count to performance to the nuances, involved with radial racing at a high level, namely track prep, track conditions, ambient air temperatures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just makes me wonder a little bit about where we're at in the radial racing life cycle. And this is something that I think exists in every walk of life. Products and things are introduced, and they have a natural, they have a natural journey through the world or whatever. And there's highs and there's lows, and sometimes it plateaus and maintains for a long time. But I think radial racing, and when I say radial racing, what I'd like to really talk specifically about is kind of the largely unrestricted Radial versus World program that was made fashionable by Donald Long down in Valdosta, Georgia at South Georgia Motorsports Park over the course of the last decade. I think, Mike, Alex, you will likely both agree that this class has defied all odds in terms of staying power and significance in our community. But I'm telling you, and I don't mean to bash on anybody that was there this weekend, but I don't know that I'd ever seen that type of racing's flaws. No, bear with me here. I know it's super exciting. I know there's records being set and there's all these things, but those cars and the track prep that is required for them to compete and perform consistently, the track temperature being such a critical part of the program, where a lot of times you're forced to have to race late at night. The separation between the haves and have-nots. I mean, you have teams out there competing that are associated with foreign countries, NFL football players, and then you have guys that have tow shops and repair shops that are trying to compete on the same level. And I'm just curious, I personally felt, and this is a bold statement, I felt like I saw Radial versus the World jump the shark. I know I don't know if everybody knows what that even means, but there was late in the glory days of Happy Days, the very classic television show, there was an episode where Fonzie jumped the shark on a pair of water skis, and it was like the end of the show. It marked the last, like, okay, you guys are trying too hard, this deal's over. And I'm not saying radial racing is over, but I really think we've seen Radial versus the World at its height, and I don't know where we go from here.
I think everything has a life cycle, like you said. There are, some people joked it's Radial versus the wallet, right? So that automatically makes that pool shrink a little bit more. I think, when you race for $101,000 one weekend, where do you race next? Is the $5,000 purse, $7,500 purse, or $10,000 purse? That's, that doesn't work. And I think there's a lot that, you see in the market over the years. Pro Extreme went through this as well, right? It gets to a point where the unlimited nature of it starts to push a lot of people out. There's only so many people willing to change your rods and pistons after, 5 runs with a twin screw car at 70 pounds of boost, 80 pounds of boost. So, I mean, I think you start to see that in some of the unlimited categories, and it's, the class is great. It's fun, but like you said, it becomes complicated when it's not at the duck races.
I really think that what we're going to need to do is just like Rocky Mountain Race Week. Like Alex that is an event that it's a like singular function. You know what I mean? Like that exists in one part of the United States one time a year. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Alex. I apologize.
That's
but
okay.
I think that Radio versus the World will live on in Valdosta, Georgia, or in under Donald the Duck Long's watchful eye. I truly think that, I'm not saying the class is immediately going away, but I think the day of Radio versus the World, you can ask Donald. It was never meant to be a class. It was never meant to be a class of drag racing. It was never meant to be, as Brett Kepner would say, to be an eliminator. It was a once-a-year freak show, which saw immediate success, basically, and Donald expanded on it by having basically what amounts to a spring and fall version of this come one, come all freak show of a drag race. Competitive or promoters seeking to jump on the bandwagon started hosting their own Radio versus the World races all over the country, and it was never meant to be that. And I feel we are seeing that was never going to be successful. It was never going to be a class it was never going to be pro stock or pro mod or something. I don't think it's franchisable is what I'm saying. It's a restaurant that you can't replicate. They have one, a great one in Valdosta, but you can't buy the franchise and open one in New York and Arkansas and expect to have any success.
I think, but to your point, where a lot of people had said that it, what hurt Radio versus the World, some of the longtime guys, was letting the pro mods in. In my opinion, letting the pro mods in is how it's going to keep going, right? Because like you said, it's that several, 3, 4, 5 times a year at most freak show. And these guys can go use the car somewhere else. They can go run pro mod, and a lot of guys have done that very successfully. I mean, look at the Galot Motorsports guys. They can go back and forth between, PDRA and Radio versus the World and be successful with it. And I think letting the pro mods in has definitely prolonged it. Now, some of the, I might get some hate mail from, some of the longtime guys who have the all steel cars, but without the pro mods, I don't think the level of attention and longevity would have been there.
I agree. Alex, I cut you off a moment ago. I don't want to squeeze you entirely out of this conversation.
Sorry, Alex.
Okay. That's okay. No, earlier I was just going to say, like, highlight on the fact that I'm not in a position knowledge-wise to say, like, oh, it's too expensive. I don't have that back knowledge. However, you hate to see any class or anything wish it out kind of thing, because, it does draw attention. There's something for everyone. However, like you're saying, I do agree there is a life cycle to it. You can see that in going to the steel cars and everything, like you're saying, bringing in the pro mods. It's like it's taken on a different mutated form where it is becoming something that that it's not sustainable, maybe. I mean, I'm not in the position money-wise to speak on that, but that's all I had to say earlier.
Well, it's long since been, Alex and Mike will attest to this, the curse of heads-up drag racing, right? I mean, unfortunately, at different times, it's a race to the end, a race to the bottom, and it's an amazing thing while it lasts. And I certainly wish the class well, and I've loved being a part of it. I've loved reporting on it over the years and talking about it on shows like Burnout. But I do wonder what's next. And I ask everybody, all of our viewers, let us know what you think, because one of the things that we want to talk about in the coming weeks is, if not Radio versus the World, then what? What is it? Is it Pro 275? Is it limited drag radial? What class do you think is prepared or is poised to step into that marquee role and carry radial racing forward? So let us know on social media. Hit us up. Use the hashtag Burnout. We'd love to know what you have to think or you have to say about it. And that, guys, is this week's 3 Big Things. This week on Reaction Time, we have our first ever video. We've been waiting for this moment. We've used up not all of our archived drag racing photos, of course not, but we've been waiting with bated breath to get some live action here on Burnout and look at what happened this past weekend. This weekend, courtesy of a Speed Video Race Day replay, we've got a great clip of Brennan Mills' very scary fire this past weekend at Darlington Dragway. You'll notice immediately there's very little social distancing going on there on the starting line. Here's some social distance, though. Ooh.
Oh.
Ooh.
Oh, no.
That's a rough one. Yeah.
That's a rough way. It kicked the rods out of it or something. He's in his own oil.
Oh, my gosh.
No, so what happened was an EGT had come loose. EGT.
Really?
Yeah, and when it blew out of the pipe, it took out a fuel line.
Oh, that's a bad
okay,
deal.
that makes sense.
That's why
Sliding
it just
for
keeps
sure.
feeding the fuel, the fire. Yeah, just.
Steve Logan with the impressive play-by-play on the PA here. I'm seeing a drone capturing video footage of this. They're spraying down. Is our driver out yet? Wow,
Nope, there he's out. He's out. Oh my god.
He's out.
They say it was 40 seconds in the fire, and he had gotten, according to him, he had gotten caught on the cage with his Hans device.
Because I saw him coming out.
So
I saw him coming out, and then he stopped.
Yeah.
Wow.
You see the door kick open like as soon as the car comes to a stop. Okay,
Wow,
so here's the
look at that.
EGT
Look
coming
at
out, and that
he's trying to get
I don't know.
started.
we're gonna get some fluid underneath the car. We're gonna get some fluid underneath the car there.
Sliding.
Fuel lines knocked off of it. You can actually see the liquid spraying, and now but you can see this. He's out of the car really quickly.
Yeah, you saw him got out quick, and then it was like he went back in, and so I didn't. That makes sense that his Hans got caught. That's crazy.
Yeah. So it got caught, and his quick thinking, in the middle of this inferno, tosses off his helmet, tosses the Hans, and then
that's a scary move.
gets out.
That's scary.
Yeah, and I don't think it was. I don't think he was fully in the car. I think he was in the midst of getting out when it caught on the back.
Too close for
and
comfort.
that's when it was like, all right, toss the helmet, throw that off, and eject. But I mean, wear your safety gear. This is why, right? Because he's in longer than anticipated. And here's a guy who walks away, right? I mean, by all accounts, he was fine.
Yeah, that being in the car for whether it was 40 seconds, I obviously didn't have a stopwatch in my hand or whatever, but that was a scary scene, and it just, again, I think one of the things that's so often understated is the courage that is required to climb behind the wheel of any of these cars. Like, drag racing requires a lot of things: money, talent, skill, etc. But courage is very high up on the list, because that type of situation is staring you in the face every weekend, multiple times every weekend. So congratulations to the crew there for getting the fire put out, getting things under control, and we're obviously very excited to see Brendan Mills walk away from that very scary situation. Our very first guest on this week's episode of Burnout is longtime Top Fuel standout TJ Zizzo, one of drag racing's true "we do it for all the right reasons" guys. A guy who's been out here fighting the mega teams that exist on the NHRA Mellow Yellow Drag Racing Series trail for years, and being a real thorn in their side more often than not. How you hanging in there, TJ? You all right without any drag racing going on?
Well, I've been growing a beard instead. I haven't had a haircut in months. I kind of look like a clown, like Bozo, maybe a little bit. Yeah, man, we've been hanging in there because it's really cool, guys. With this little downtime, we have time to work on our car, things that we wanted to do for 3, 4, 5 years now, and we get a chance to do. So we're pushing, man. We keep on working really hard to get ready for our first event.
And that's really all you can do, and leave it to TJ Zizzo to find a bright side or find a way to look at the glass being half full during this COVID-19 crisis. Can you tell us just a little bit about, what are some of those things you guys have been working on in the shop and, preparation for whenever drag racing resumes?
Well, I got to tell you, our race car, first of all, is worse than my wife, right? My wife demands some attention. She deserves some of my attention. But that race car outside those windows right out there, that deserves way more of my attention and our team's attention than even my wife does. So we've been working on our laundry list, right? We have a laundry list of things. For example, in order to catch up to some of our great competitors, they're always a little bit ahead of us due to the fact that they have multiple crew chiefs. They work on their cars full time. All our guys and girls are part-time, volunteers, show up at the shop Tuesday nights, let's have some pasta, and work on our race car. So, and then Sundays all day. And I make pasta on Sundays too because it's cheap, right? I'm an Italian, so that's how you do it. Look, I'm already talking with my hands. So anyway, guys, so clutch management. We've moved over from a pneumatic to a electronic clutch management system, right? That's one big improvement to make these tweaks easier as we go along. Another thing is something like supercharger rotor to case clearances. Now we've dismantled all our superchargers and making sure they're all the same and the tolerances are good for more efficient blowers, less heat, things of that nature. Another big situation is a fuel pump. We knew St. Louis last year, our fuel pump was getting weak. We went to modify or update our fuel pump from 110 gallons to maybe a little bit more. Well, now we got a 115 gallon pump. I don't even know what we're going to do with all that fuel, but we'll figure it out, right? So we're doing all these things and moving our clutch fork back in our bell housing to get more clearance going down the racetrack. All these things we wanted to do. So now we're excited to do it. Now the question is, to me, from all of our team members, well, we've done all these things. Are we going to go test? Can we go test? Because I don't want to have 2 shots of qualifying and possibly not qualify because we made all these changes in the off season or this COVID season, right? So we may go somewhere like Mark, Michigan or Indy or something, or maybe Joliet possibly, and make a couple blasts just to see if all this stuff works properly.
I'm curious, and I just want to interject this because this isn't one of our scripted questions, so I apologize for throwing off everything, but I have to know, man, what kind of feedback and input are you getting direction-wise from the NHRA? I mean, it seems like it would be wise of, you know, the sanction officials to be organizing some sort of opportunity for a you know, an independent race team owner such as yourself to go make a few laps and kind of get back into form. I mean, we see the NBA opening up training facilities to try to get all those players back in shape for game day. What are we doing? You're looking pretty good from this angle, TJ. I don't think you've got anything to worry about. You're at fighting weight already. But seriously, have you heard anything from NHRA officials as to, you know, a possibility to go make a few shakedown runs in the coming weeks?
You know, I am blessed, right? We go out there and we try to do the best job we can for our sponsors and for NHRA and for our team. So NHRA sees that, and they've seen it for almost 18 years now. So, and we've been racing for almost 40 years. So they see our longevity, and the communication with NHRA has been better than ever before in the history, I believe, of Top Fuel, Pro, and NHRA. And I bring a little bit to the table, just a little bit. I don't want to give myself too much credit, right? But they came to us last year in St. Louis, and I said, guys, we need to communicate more. You need us, and we need you. We need to work together. So it's been really cool. Since that point, I've written some letters. We've done some things. We've worked with Pro, and we're getting organized enough so at least there's open communication, because without that, Wes, there is no such thing as NHRA Top Fuel anymore. There has to be open communication, and NHRA has been great with that. So yeah, to answer your question, maybe not directly with testing, right, or losing weight, but or training, but they have communicated greatly to us and asked us questions, and I thought it was super cool. I've learned some things about the NHRA that I never knew. I also, at the same time, got some great feedback, and they wanted my feedback. So they're asking the independent team like ourselves, not just the Don Schumachers or the Colettas or the Forces. They're asking the Zizzos of the world, who the heck am I, you know, or who am I, who's my dad, you know? But they want that feedback to make the sport better. So,
well, and if we're going to move forward, and I don't mean to cut you off, but what you just said is so important because, and I've completely derailed our interview at this point, but we'll get back on track in a moment. But what you're saying is, I mean, I hope God and the world and everyone is listening, because it's teams such as yours, TJ, that really make up the fabric of our sport. While we love, obviously we here on Burnout have an infinite amount of respect and adoration for the John Force racings and the Don Schumacher racings and the Coletta Motorsports of the world, I believe that the bulk of the racers that exist are guys like you that have an auto collision center, have other businesses, have life outside of drag racing, and of course treat it like a professional sport and work hard at it and take it very seriously. But you're exactly who the NHRA needs to be speaking to if we have a shot in hell of getting this whole deal headed in the right direction. So that is fantastic news, and I appreciate you sharing that with all of our audience here on Burnout. Alex, let's get this thing back on track and you take over. I'll be quiet.
It's okay. It's okay. So we've been seeing some different forms of racing, drag racing, saying that they can test, they're going to take the streets, they're going to go to a track. It's a little bit harder, however, to simulate a Top Fuel dragster. So what are you doing during this downtime to stay sharp as a driver?
Well, our team members set me up with a practice tree that mounts right in front of our car. I hit the gas, I pull the brake, I pull the fuel on. Everything that I would normally do, those guys gave me to like 5 years ago. And about 3 years ago, I started practicing. And hallelujah, I got better. I can't believe it. So that's what I've been doing. Our team members, I'm a stubborn Italian, right? So I'm like, guys, this isn't going to work. What are you, crazy? I know how to do this stuff. And they're like, no, TJ, can you practice for us? It took me 3 years to get into it. In the past 3 years, I've been killing it.
So you guys are obviously, not the full-time team like some other groups. And, NHRA is going to go to a pretty aggressive schedule. How has that kind of worked out for you guys in picking and choosing which events you guys are going to run and kind of that duration of, multiple weekends in a row?
Well, that's why I was so surprised that NHRA gave us a call, because they know we don't go to all the events. They know that maybe that's a goal of mine if the cash flow is correct and all that stuff. Ultimately, I got a family, I got kids, I got multiple businesses to run. I got things to do, right? Although Top Fuel is what gets me up in the morning. That's what gets me going. But to answer your question, right, that schedule that's coming out maybe allows me and our team to go to more events, which is super. And I believe that's what NHRA wanted to hear. So we go to select amount of events, not because of location, not because of anything else, but it's due to time. Our guys and girls on our team got to take off of work. Some of them work at McDonald's. Some of them work as an engineer. They got to go to their bosses, right, and say, hey, can I have 4 or 5 weeks off to go to Seattle, Washington, or to Denver, Colorado. So we, as a team collectively, kind of have a roundabout idea where we want to go and what we want to do, but that may increase. Also, let's face it, guys, it costs us $25,000 per pass to run that race car, right? Mind-boggling. Like if I told that to my wife, she would probably divorce me tomorrow, right? Don't listen, Jen. Don't listen. So anyway, so it costs us a lot of money per run. Now, I look at the expense of racing in general. I'm a budget Nazi. I am crazy with money. It's the only reason we're somewhat successful. One of the only reasons we're somewhat successful. The team behind me and working on a race car, they're way better than I am. But anyway, go back to the budget. So we have hotels to deal with. We got travel expenses. We got race car expenses. We got rent in our shop to pay for. That ultimately goes back to my dad and I because we own the building. But anyway, so what I'm getting at is making 2 less runs and having 1 less day of qualifying will allow teams like us to go to more events. I love that kind of stuff. And personally, if that all happens, if that works out, maybe NHRA will realize, hey, maybe 2-day events are a little bit better. Maybe let's have some nighttime eliminations. Maybe let's do some nighttime qualifying more than it is. Because now it excites me just thinking about 2 shots of qualifying, because you go out there, right, as a driver. Drivers are, during qualifying, we're useless. We really are useless. It's important that the car's set up. It's important that we stage well, but we're nothing. We're along for the ride. Well, now, first round of qualifying, right? You only have 2 shots of qualifying. You go out there, the thing starts smoking the tires. What am I going to do? Normally, you just back off the gas and coast. How boring was that? That was boring. Okay, now you got to be off the gas, squeeze back on the gas, and go to the finish line, because the second round of qualifying, you don't want to be one of the first cars to run. You want to still be kind of closer to the back of the pack to see what it takes to get in. What if it takes a 6:30 to get in? What if it takes a 3:90 to get in? What if it takes a 3:65 to get in? So you don't know. You want to know where you're going for that second round of qualifying. So it makes it super exciting for us. So if the schedule lays out the way it might, we will absolutely attempt to go to more races, Michael. That's our thought.
It's amazing, to be honest. I mean, it's amazing, and you kind of answered our next question, was just how these change in formats would be, would impact your team. And I'm just curious to kind of go right back to what you're talking about, TJ. How do you think that? I mean, have you heard the buzz in the industry? Have you heard from any of the other team owners and operators? Like, do people have an open mind as to a 2-day format or night racing? Have people in your community or people that you're close to or work with regularly, is that something everybody's accepting or would be accepting of?
I'm taking a deep breath, Wes. I'm taking a deep breath. I grew up 16 years old in the middle of some cornfield going 240 miles an hour, due on the racetrack, trying to get the car to go to the finish line. That's how I grew up racing, right?
Yes.
It's bad to the bone. It's exciting for fans. You have flames at night. You have all these things. It's dark. You might not be able to see. Your visor might be fogged up. You have all these things going on. But guess what? The fans love it. Some drivers and team owners hate it. And it drives me crazy. Grow some sack and do whatever it takes to get that car to the finish line and make it work. We're all under the same conditions, guys. Like, if it's 2 a.m, it's 2 a.m. If it's
for everyone,
it's for everybody. It's for everybody. So let's just do it. So I think it would be exciting for the fans, and NHRA I think is they're challenged, and I'm stuttering over my words because I don't want to say anything completely wrong, right? But I believe they're a little worried about it because the family atmosphere. Cool thing about drag racing is it's still a family atmosphere. You could bring your 4-year-old, your 12-year-old, and your wife, and the husband, or whatever, and enjoy the day, right? But there's still a hardcore fan, especially here in the Midwest. But that's all we have grown up going to the small Union Grove, Wisconsin racetracks. That's seriously 2 a.m. to race, or waiting for the rain and racing late. So I would hope that, especially in markets where night racing is accepted and people still go to watch night racing, that it happens. I really do. And trust me, I beat on that bush a lot over at NHRA. So they've heard me loud and clear. And once again, their receptors are up. They're listening. Guys. They're listening. So maybe someday that could happen.
I honestly think, and kind of in closing, TJ, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share a lot of incredible insight, to be honest. I honestly hope that there is a way that this whole tragedy that has been the coronavirus pandemic and the way it's affected so many people and businesses and taken lives and everything in between, I do hope the NHRA, maybe there's an opportunity to be better for this. Sometimes we don't change, we get comfortable, we do things the way they've always been done. And in this moment, they're being forced to change. And it personally feels, and I can't speak for everyone, but I know that I feel like we may see things better in the future because of the changes that we had to make here during this COVID-19 crisis. So TJ, thank you so much, dude. We need to talk to you more often. I think I say that about everybody, but man, you get up on the tire and I could do this all freaking day long, man. Thank you so much. I know you got plenty of other things to do, but we appreciate you joining us here on Burnout.
All right, so this week we got Chris Rini coming to us from the Carolinas. He had a big win at WOOOSTOCK. Some of you guys might have recognized the name from NHRA Top Sportsman as the Northern Assassin, and he, successful in NMCA, PDRA. And Chris, thanks for coming on the show this week.
Well, thank you for having me.
So you come out of the gate, going into every season, you put a bunch of test laps on the car, but you came out of the gate in WOOOSTOCK after this COVID-19 break, and you just, ran right to the top of the Pro Mod class over at WOOOSTOCK. Tell us how that went for you.
It went pretty good. I mean, we haven't done a lot of testing. Obviously, everybody's been parked for, 2 months now. We did go out in the beginning of the season for the first Carolina Extreme race there at Darlington, same weekend as the Orlando deal for the Pro Mods. And, we did real well there. The conditions were a total opposite. I mean, it was 55 degrees, at best 60 during the middle of the day. So, we had a completely different setup and we had a completely different racetrack. Here we are, fast forward, we roll out as quote unquote the season opener but it's really the second season opener. And it was 88 degrees. Track temperature got to 138, and it was a new condition, a summer condition.
It was interesting, man. I mean, and we'll talk about the success that you had as we continue through this. But what was it like going to a race where you knew there weren't going to be any fans there and just eliminating that aspect? I don't know about you, but it kind of felt like we were doing something we weren't supposed to be doing, right? Like it felt like we were, I don't know, having a fight club in the basement of a warehouse or something.
Well, the ironic part is I was going there with the intentions of having fans on the spectator side, and that all changed, I guess, Thursday. And
Yeah.
kind of deflating, I mean, it's enjoyable to see people get into it, and I'm sure a lot of the fans are chomping at the bit, so to speak, to get out there and watch the cars make laps and, see the tight runs. And, it was, for me, when I get in the car, the last thing I look at is the grandstands, So, I mean, but as far as the whole event, it was kind of like a test session with a race. It was very unusual to drive into South Carolina and see like the Waffle House open and people sitting down inside. It was almost like, I feel like the United States has been it's like the Day After movie, where you drive down the road and restaurants are closed up and there's signs on the doors, and you go into a Subway, even though they're still open, they got all the seats saran wrapped, and you show up in South Carolina and it was relatively normal, which felt abnormal.
Yeah. I was actually surprised the level of openness that was going on in South Carolina personally. I've seen it a multitude of different ways. Just recently moved from Missouri, which was pretty well everything is closed. Go to Texas, where pretty much everything is open, and then go to South Carolina, where it felt like there was a mix of the two things. It was an interesting thing for sure, man, for sure.
Having all this off time and getting to go back racing and actually having a very successful race when you went back, has it made you appreciate even more being able to race? Do you have a new outlook on, having a track that you can go to and actually go racing again?
Yeah. I mean, it was, we rolled in there to test on Thursday to kind of blow the dust off of me, the car, the crew, and it was very interesting because first order of business when all this came to play and Keith had put out that, okay, WOOOSTOCK is happening and it's going to be limited crew and we'll let everybody know when we know. And this whole let everybody know thing was kind of like all the unknown. So initially my phone's blowing up with, the guys that help but aren't critical guys going, if you really don't need me, I won't go because I know that you need him. And, it was kind of a weird deal. I mean, and the weirdest part about it, it's kind of like, when you were young, your parents told you couldn't do something. Now everybody wants to do it more. It was like all of a sudden, I always as many crew guys as possible. And then you're like, oh, we're missing this guy and he cooks the food. And now it was like we had more volunteers because everybody was so eager to go, and it was like it felt like it was going to be some kind of big thing as far as not so much the big thing as far as the race, but just a big thing to go out there and do it like that once a year vacation we once took,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I'll interject this. I blow up all these interviews, so I apologize. We have a script every time. We have a list of what we're going to do, but I can't help myself. So, but you just touched on something that not like the race was that big of a deal, but I've got to say that, I have written about this extensively over the course of the last couple of days that I feel the Pro Mod show, the Carolina Extreme Pro Mod Series, stole the show in Darlington. It was without question the best competition, the highlight of the whole weekend. And I just have to know, I mean, that had to feel different. You won the Carolina Extreme Pro Mod season opener, but how different is it to win a Carolina Extreme Pro Mod race when you look down that list and you see names like Ricky Smith, Charles Carpenter, Jim Halsey, Jay Cox, Randy Weatherford. I mean, these are John Strickland, the Galat cars are there. I mean, that was a collection of, I would argue, one of the most diverse Pro Mod shows I've seen in many, many years, and some of the highest level competition. And to be the last man standing, Chris, like, it may be an East Coast quick 8, but that was as you couldn't have picked a tougher deal to go contend with and to win it. I mean, you got to be feeling like $1 million.
Oh yeah, and to win it, I looked at the same thing. I knew going in it was going to be a lot of cars that we wouldn't normally see because everybody wanted to race, and I knew that a lot of cars also wanted to kind of get back out there and go through the motions so they get their teams ready for whatever series they're running. I mean, we had guys from NMCA, NHRA, PDRA Pro Boost, PDRA Pro Nitrous. I mean, it was a cool deal, and like you said, at the end of the day, there was no slouches. It wasn't just a local race. It ended up to be, guys traveled from all over because they were tired of sitting home. And, I knew it was going to be fast going in. I said, oh, this is not going to be, we're going to have to run it as hard as we do at Pro Nitrous PDRA, if not harder, because we got all these other power adders. And I said, okay, we just got to qualify solid, and you always have this plan, kind of like when you get
Right.
a plan on what you're going to do for this interview, and here we are derailed. It's like
Right.
we have this plan of going in, we're going to do the best we can to qualify. When you qualify at the front, because the field's going to be hard enough, and all teams probably going with that same outlook. And then it was, okay, we missed it on the best session, and I'm like, oh my goodness. First round of eliminations, we had missed it the round before. I mean, we knew we'd put it together and make a good run in E1, but we had nothing to base the day off of. And I was just like, okay, here we are. We slid back 6 spots in one qualifying session. And I didn't, I didn't want to race the first race to be the tight race, and every race ended up to be tight. There was no round I went into thinking that I just need to go A to B and go green and pull the parachutes, and we got this. It was like we need to do performance the best we can. I need to drive the best I can. We need to make no mistakes, and hopefully we'll end up with the light on the wall,
So you knocked the dust off, for that race. PDRA in 2 weeks. Now that tracks are starting to loosen up, are you going to get out testing before that event, or you feel like you got a good base after this weekend?
I feel that we got a good car. We got a good base. That's another really good racetrack. So we'll roll in there. We'll test on Thursday and we'll race. These cars are getting more and more costly to make laps up and down the racetrack. The consumables have gone up tremendously. And, I don't think we're that far away from being where we need to be. So, and I'm not sounding like I'm confident or cocky or nothing like that. I'm just saying that I don't want to wear out parts for the sake of wearing out parts. I'm going to go there. We'll make a couple test hits on Thursday. And then we'll be ready to race. And we go in there with a lot of momentum. My guys are pumped. Everybody's stoked. Hopefully North Carolina is as lenient as possible on us, and I say that in a kind of an unknown space where you got whatever the amount of cars are going to be, and then 3 to 4 guys per crew or whatever they allow. And there's a lot of people, and people associate with other people. So depending on how they corral us, so to speak, is depending on, how that event goes, and South Carolina has been a little bit looser because they were open first. They started opening their phase 1 stuff, and,
Right.
North Carolina's still not there. So it'll be interesting to see. It's still another week and a half away, so things could change.
Do you think that this shorter PDRA season, does that type of situation help or hurt? We actually were surprised by a guest earlier in the show, TJ Zizzo, an independent Top Fuel racer in the NHRA. He mentioned to us that a tighter schedule with more 2-day races actually may open the door for him to race more. If we see a bunch of races stacked really close together, Chris, do you feel like that's going to open the door for you to race more frequently, or how do you, or in the chase to the championship, how do you see that impacting things? Like when you talk about the consumables involved, does your approach to racing lend itself to that kind of a whole lot real fast?
I don't know. I'm not a big fan of a whole lot real fast. It's hard on everybody for time. And if you have any kind of breakage or parts failure, it's just that much more rushing around. I like a little bit of breather between the races to get everything set and ready. I don't like to roll into a race with overnighting things the day that we're showing up and building things at the racetrack. I try to go in there as prepared as can be because you've been around this long enough. There's so many things that could fail. And when you put it under the gun and you don't have that in the shop, look over the car. The car is 100% ready when you load it in the trailer and the materials, and you got a backup of everything. It becomes a little bit more dicey, where it just opens up another window for you to possibly lose. And knowing that, if we start doing too much back to back, if you have parts failure, you might not have a backup component, whether it's motor, transmission, rear end, or it's just the cost of it will increase too, because we're just trying to expedite everything.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. I've been wondering, and I think we're going to see an update to the PDRA schedule here in the coming days, more than likely. And I'm really eager to get my eyes on that and just see how they're going to navigate this, and knowing that so many other racers are men like yourself that own businesses and operate oftentimes multiple businesses, and the notion of just racing week in and week out is completely unreasonable. So very interesting insight, Chris. And I can't tell you, man, I know you have been doing kind of like the press tour the last couple of days following your big win on Saturday night, man. I'm glad they got the Pro Mod shootout in. Again, I think you guys stole the show, and thank God for yourself and that whole crew of Carolina Extreme Pro Mod racers, because you carried the water at WOOOSTOCK in 2020, brother, man. Congratulations on all your success, and thanks for joining us.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the compliments. One of my crew guys told me today, if there was any race to win, this might have been it, because it was like the come out race, and it was
agreed.
So anticipated. We needed to get our teeth around something. So, I mean, I'm hoping to keep up the streak, and, rolling into next week, PDRA Pro Nitrous, it'll be another tough field. It'll be a good racetrack. It'll be another dogfight. And, kind of going back to the whole, I really hope they don't just stack them where it becomes unrealistic for the crew. A lot of my guys that helped me, we're a bunch of good old guys. I mean, this is not a professional team. These guys are taking off of work, and they're employed by somebody else, so they don't have as much control of their time as I do, or as some of us do. So I'm hoping that they kind of take that into consideration. It's not like just cram and get all these races shoved in, because the outcome may not be what they're looking for.
I agree, man. And I'm looking forward for the PDRA to kick the doors open and get on with their season, man. There are so many great racers and great people involved in that segment, man. And I'm hoping you're able to carry over some of the momentum from Darlington to Galat Motorsports Park. We talked about the importance of that momentum, man, and you definitely have it on your side. So get back after it, and we'll talk to you soon, buddy. And I think I'll see you in North Carolina at Galat. And in closing, this week's Racing in Review looks back at WOOOSTOCK, the 4th annual running of WOOOSTOCK at Darlington Dragway, the major production by Keith Berry, Lance Stanford, and Travis Harvey of the Carolina No Time Association, as well as Darlington Dragway's own Russell Miller and Rhett Gardner. I was there on the grounds, Mike and Alex. It was so good to be back at the drag strip. The legendary Darlington Dragway is a track that just has a lot of history. You kind of feel like you're at a honky tonk, and that's like the most affectionate of terms. It just one of those places that have heart and soul, and it was so, I'll tell you, it was electric there. My immediate reaction was you could sense the desire, you could sense the passion of people just to be at the racetrack. I mean, as we spoke earlier in the show, you had guys entering all sorts of classes maybe they don't typically race, anything they could do. Crew members coming out of the woodwork, people who have never, ever in their life been classified as a crew member were crew members this past weekend in Arlington Dragway, because they wanted to be at the racetrack that bad, man. I mean, could you guys sense that kind of electricity even watching from afar?
Yeah, I mean, like Tulsa was kind of like dip your big toe into the pool, kind of see how it is in terms of drag racing, people kind of keeping their eye on it. And it seemed like, Darlington was a place to be last weekend as a lot of people jumped in the pool and to have some fun. It was great to see some good drag racing. I know it was cut short, but what we did see was good and entertaining.
I think seeing everybody's post, agree in that same line, you see the excitement to be back. And a picture that's been shared a lot that really got me was the one of Keith holding the #1 fan sign, the only one in the stands. It's like to see his message that he put with that. I was like, you know what? That's kind of like, it's like a reset on your outlook on racing. And I feel like that was highly shared because I think people that are at home watching that, they know it too. So.
Well, and that's something that I actually, and for the record, Keith's original plan was to hold that sign while dressed as a Tyrannosaurus Rex. One of those inflatable dinosaur costumes.
Yeah.
And I talked him out of that. I said, I think there's actually a really picturesque Kodak moment to be had with you in the stands holding that #1 fan sign up, because I actually really relate to that. At the core of who I am, I feel that I'm the biggest drag racing fan. I've raced, I've put on events, I worked in the industry or whatever, but at the core, at the root of it, I'm the biggest fan of drag racing. And Keith is as well. This is not his livelihood. Keith Berry earns his living taking over chicken plants around the country, installing machinery. And to see him invest the time and energy and dollars in that event and executing it in the face of all sorts of adversity. I mean, I can't imagine the emotional roller coaster. I mean, this guy was calling me every day months ago, just wondering if they were going to have to cancel it. Then they pushed the date out a month. And then it was, I don't know if we're going to be able to stick to that. Should we just cancel it? I'm scared of doing it. Why bother? All these different things. And then it's, you know what? We're going to do it. We're moving forward. Then a week after that, hey, we're going to get to have fans. This is going to be awesome. Then 4 days after that, not going to be able to have fans. Like, just what that must have felt like for them. I will say, and this is kind of moving away from the actual on-track action, which is most certainly worth talking about. I do hope in 2021, or at least just as everyone moves forward in their lives, racers specifically remember these facilities that took it on the chin. I look at guys like Russell Miller and Keith Berry, and I hold them in high regard because they went into this weekend in Darlington with virtually no winnable scenario, right? I mean, there was just, all they had to fight for was their honor, really, was to do what they said they were going to do, put on an event, pay the purses. And I just think it's a really honorable thing that they did by putting on that race without really any profit motive. I think the best situation that they could have hoped for was to break even. Like, if we can break even on this deal, we have hit a home run. And I know that, that's a sentiment that many promoters have felt. That's a situation that a lot of guys have had to close their eyes and go, man, if I can just get out of here with the shirt on my back, that's all I'm asking for, God. You know, and for those guys to be in that situation and to forge forward, I thought it was an incredible act of bravery, really. And it was a real service to the sport. And I hope that next summer, when things are back to normal, and there's a zillion races on the schedule, and there are plenty of places to go the second weekend of March, I hope they remember wherever Keith Berry is or wherever Russell Miller is, they need to cast their vote for those guys.
No, it's taking that big step, right? And it's so important to take that big step, and they were one of the first to do it. Not the first, but one of the first to do it. And it's you know, getting back to Major League Baseball after 9/11 was such a huge ordeal, and you know, just emotionally for fans and for the players. Yeah. I mean, and that's, I think it is for drag racing, and you know, it's all part of our lives. For some of us, it's how we make a living, and to get
you're giving me goosebumps. Great. Giving me goosebumps. You're right.
It's monstrous.
It is.
It's monstrous, man. And I will say the on-track action did not disappoint. I mean, the Thursday night qualifying session, which took place like around 11 or midnight at night, I mean, it was a late night affair there at Darlington Dragway. We saw run after run in the radial versus the world category, which we talked at length about earlier in this episode of Burnout. We saw Stevie Jackson come off the trailer. I thought this might have been his best flex on them moment when he did not test. There was a slew of other racers that had been testing there since like Monday or Tuesday, making multiple runs a day. Stevie Jackson, Phil Schuler, Billy Stocklin and company chose not to. They came off the trailer Thursday night, 11, 12 o'clock at night, go straight to number one. 356 out of that screw-blown power plant between the frame rails of Shadow 2.0. There are Rick Jones race cars built Camaro that is basically known around the world, perhaps one of the best known drag racing cars on the planet. And it was a it was a jaw dropper. I mean, everybody that was there, they expect Stevie to run well, but I don't think anybody expected him to jump out like that. And to do that off the trailer was massively impressive. Kevin Rivenbark followed that effort up with a 359 in his Pro Charger, Galat Motorsports Chevy Camaro, Jerry Bickle car, Proline power plant. And there was also a slew of killer runs in the Carolina Extreme Pro Mod series. We talked to Chris Rini earlier, but I'll tell you guys, and I'm anxious, this is something that you have a lot of experience with, Mike, with I think one of the shining stars in the drag racing galaxy is NMCA's Extreme Pro Mod division. You see this week in and week out, but to see roots blowers, we didn't have any screw blowers in the category. We did see roots blowers, turbo cars, blower cars, big inch nitro stuff, Liberties, Lenkos, Turbo 400s. There was a lot of variety, man, and a lot of parity, great competition. I saw Jim Halsey go 369 with an 8 with a Jim Halsey built Bullet in his nitrous assisted Camaro. A run later, Randy Weatherford clicks off a 369 with an 8 in his Proline powered Pro Charged Hemi Camaro. So it was just like, God, this is drag racing just like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the mixed categories are always fun, and the great rules package there this weekend, which provided a lot of fun for, if you watch like that run after run, like you said, and just the closeness and the diversity. And that's, I think, what's always attracted me to Pro Mod is, the crazy looking cars and it's not just one combination. And there's fun in that, but to see the rivalries, built-in rivalries is great. It's always fun to watch.
It's automatic over there in Pro Mod, right? There's black hats, white hats, and everything, baby faces, heels, and everything in between.
If you like one, you have to hate the other.
You have to hate the other. I remember a few weeks ago, right here on Burnout, we were interviewing Alex Laughlin. Alex, you brought up like power plants or something, and it was crazy to see how instantaneously salty the guy gets when we start talking about nitrous cars. Oh, I hate those guys. Hate those cars. Don't like them. But it's cool because those built-in rivalries, man, that's so good for our sport. And Alex, I don't want you to feel left out. There was a plethora of street cars there. The coolest thing about the Carolina No Time scene is that so many, you've got dedicated race cars, you've got purpose-built, badass, real deal race cars, but you also have like Coyote Mustangs with twin turbos that run 5s and were driven to the track. Those cars are worth their weight in gold in the street car scene. So you were well represented out there. You should be proud.
My heart is overwhelmed with joy now.
It was a great weekend for the sport of drag racing. And we saw this in Tulsa, that first step. I think this was another step in the right direction. And we've talked about this ad nausea here on Burnout in week 8, but it's the energy is there. People are ready to go racing. And I sincerely hope everyone else feels the same way, that there's some momentum, the tide is turning. It's not just Chris Rini. It's all of us that are starting to enjoy a little sense of momentum. And I can't wait to spend the next however many weekends talking about what kind of badass race we had go on this past weekend. And that's it for the race and review. And now for the next set. Wait, we're done. That's it. We're already at the finish line. How about it, guys? I think with Burnout, man, we have really continued to hit our stride, and we are so blessed with these guests, right? I mean, I just feel like week in and week out, these men and women deliver. TJ Zizzo, incredible insight. I really think that's very valuable. I hope all the racers out there in the world are listening. Business owners, entrepreneurs, communication is so important. And to talk to a real deal, dyed-in-the-wool door slammer drag racer like Chris Rini, I think we did it good this week.
It was great. Some great reviews and interesting characters we had on the show. So it's another 8 weeks down that we've done this. It's hard to believe it's been 8 weeks since we started.
I know, and every week I think, I'm like, wow, that interview was great. And then I'm like, no, that one was great. And it just keeps getting better.
Yeah.
It does, man. And I appreciate your guys' involvement. I think that we've really gelled as a group here. And I'm glad to be, kind of establishing ourselves as drag racing's talking heads. People look forward to seeing what we have to say. And it's been a ton of fun, man. And I don't know about you guys, but getting into the rhythm of talking about racing, I think we spent the first 5-6 episodes of Burnout talking about almost exclusively coronavirus. And that will continue as we, as a nation, as a people, continue to trudge through this global pandemic. But to have the distraction of drag racing back in our lives, I feel so thankful. Alex, you asked this of Chris Rini earlier in the show. Do you find yourself feeling a little more gratitude about just simply going to the races? And I tell you what, I'll answer that question. Yes, I feel a lot more gratitude. And I want to ask you too, do you guys, are you as eager, about your return to the drag racing world as I have been? Do you think that you'll see this whole deal through a little bit different lens moving forward?
Oh,
I think so. I think it'll not be like I'm tired, like I've got, I'm gotta go again. It's gonna be like, I get to go again kind of thing. So.
Yep, that's exactly right.
The anticipation, the unexpected rug getting pulled out from under us from a great start to, I think, what would have been an incredible 2020 race season. And it's you're anxious to get back, and you do appreciate the time that you could spend with friends and family that are on the road.
It's a whole new world out there, guys, and I'm so glad drag racing is still part of it. And I know that I've complained in the past, you get jaded over the years. You do enough of this stuff and I don't want to go there, or man, it's a long drive from the airport to that racetrack, or the internet's horrible at that racetrack. I found myself the last few weekends just being so genuinely happy to get to do what we do for a living and go to the drag races and be a part of this incredible community. So, hey, onward and upward, my friends. And that's it for this week's episode of Burnout. We'll see you next week, bigger and better than ever, Thursday night. Stay tuned, guys. We appreciate you.